Hello again, World History 2 students. Welcome to another edition of VidNotes video casts. We're on to lesson number 2. On the upper left-hand corner, you should see the environment and refugees. And these are two modern world issues we will be addressing. You see the two photographs on your screen, which show examples of these two issues. Before we dive in, let's review. We also talked about how rapidly our population is growing. And you see here how we have about 7 billion people in the world, according to this chart. 200 years ago, we only had about 1 billion people. So how are we dealing with this extensive population growth? Are we becoming overpopulated? Can we handle this amount of people? Or are our resources running out? That's what we've been talking about. Also, China and India make up 37% of the world's population. They are rapidly growing. China makes up 1.3 billion of the world. India makes up 1 billion of the world's population. The United States, we're at number 3, and we only make up 4.6% of the world's people. It just shows you how many people China and India have. Let's dive in now to the modern world's lesson number 2. Here we go. What are the world's environmental challenges? And the first environmental challenge that we have been dealing with is global climate change. You see this graph from NASA from 1880 to 2000 shows there has been a trend upward in the surface temperature on the Earth, showing global climate change exists. Here's another map. This compares 1979 to the year 2010, and it compares the Arctic sea ice. Look at the amount of sea ice in 79, compare it to the year 2010. Our sea ice is melting, and we can say that's because of global climate change. Number 2 in the environmental challenge list, pollution, both air pollution and water pollution, which affects our health. Remember we said China was one of the world's most populated countries? Well, China's dealing with a pollution problem. And I'm going to zero in on one city in China that is specifically dirty. Here's China. Here's the capital of China, Beijing. Southwest of Beijing is a city called Linfen. Now, spending one day in Linfen is the equivalent to smoking 3 packs of cigarettes just by stepping outside. This is the world's most polluted city, and it's an example of how we need to address the developing countries in the world and their environmental challenges. Number 3, deforestation is an environmental challenge. And you see this photograph here that shows deforestation, the cutting down of trees, which can lead to environmental challenges affecting our air supply. Number 4, animals' loss of habitat. That is an environmental challenge because when our ecosystem is thrown out of whack, when animals lose their habitat, everyone is affected by this. And you see this lonely polar bear, a victim of global climate change, a victim of that Arctic sea ice melting. So in a nutshell, to review, the 4 environmental challenges, global climate change, pollution, deforestation, and animals' loss of habitat. These 4 lead to social challenges. People are affected by the environment. How? Well, these are 4 negative challenges: poverty, famine, migration, and poor health. And as an example, you see this farmer with his tool who cannot use the earth because It has dried out, the cracks of drought in the ground. If a farmer can't do his job, food cannot be created. That causes poverty and famine and poor health, and it might cause people to migrate, to travel out of a country and into another country. And some of these people move out of a place by force, and that's called a refugee. So what is a refugee? A person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. So an environmental challenge like a famine would be a natural disaster. But refugees are also forced to flee because of instability in their country. And you see this refugee camp in Africa that's been organized by the UN, the United Nations. And one group, a nonprofit in Charlottesville, handles refugee issues. It's called the International Rescue Committee. Here's its logo here. Maybe you've seen it around town. And about 200 refugees move to Charlottesville each year through the International Rescue Committee. Where are these refugees from? They're from Iraq, Afghanistan, in the Middle East. They're from Nepal, in Asia. They're from the Congo, in Africa. All of these countries are unstable. There have been wars that are going on. Some of these citizens are not welcome by their government. So the IRC brings them to Charlottesville and to 21 other cities in the United States so that they can be safe. It's important to make a distinction between what a refugee is and what an immigrant is. Immigration is moving into a country or a region, often by choice. A refugee leaves his homeland or her homeland not by choice, by force, because of a war or because of an environmental disaster. And that's the difference. Sometimes you have guest workers who stay in a country temporarily to work. And this is a controversial area because some guest workers never leave that country, and the government of that country might not want them there long term because they're costly and they may not pay taxes. It becomes a political issue. Guest workers help a country by filling a need in this country's economy. They work. Guest workers also are able to support their family by being employed. So there are two helps for guest working. It helps a country's economy and it helps the guest worker's family. What happens if a guest worker wants to stay in a country permanently? As I said, that's where the trouble comes in politically. There have been a recent migration of guest workers to America and Western Europe. And this example shows you Germany. Why Germany? Well, America and Western Europe, and Germany is included in Western Europe, have free market economies. These economies allow for higher standards of living and more political freedoms, desirable for people. Okay, we've reached our summary question section. When you're done answering you are done for today. See you next time.